Jessica Morgan gripped her phone tightly as she rushed down the crowded sidewalk. 3 new emails had just popped up, each marked urgent, and her boss wanted the quarterly report revised before the 3 p.m. meeting. A light drizzle started falling, dotting her navy blazer with tiny droplets. Perfect, just perfect, watch it. A man in a gray suit barked as she nearly collided with him, her eyes still locked on her screen. Sorry, she mumbled, sidestepping without looking up. Jessica's stomach growled, reminding her she hadn't eaten since the protein bar she'd grabbed at 6 a.m. It was already 1:15 p.m., and the marketing meeting had run long. She glanced up, scanning the street for somewhere to grab a quick bite. Her eyes landed on a small bistro across the street, Café Bleu. She'd never been there before, but the modern exterior and the best brunch in the city sign in the window looked promising. Inside, the cafe hummed with lunchtime activity. Business people tapped away on laptops while young couples leaned across tables, laughing over colorful plates of food. The warm smell of fresh bread and coffee wrapped around her like a blanket. "Just one?" asked the host, a young man with kind eyes. Jessica nodded, sliding her phone into her blazer pocket. "Something quick, please. I'm on a tight schedule." He led her to a small table near the window, handed her a menu, and promised her server would be right with her. Jessica immediately pulled out her phone again, scrolling through emails while keeping one eye on the time. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Jessica drummed her fingers on the table, her hunger morphing into irritation. She looked around for her server but saw only busy staff rushing past with trays of steaming food. None of them even glanced her way. Just as she was about to get up and leave, a young woman with curly hair pulled into a loose ponytail approached her table, slightly out of breath. "Hi, I'm Amber, and I'll be your server today," she said, placing a glass of water in front of Jessica. "I'm so sorry about the wait. Can I start you off with something to drink?" Jessica glanced pointedly at her watch. "I've been sitting here for almost 15 minutes. Amber's smile faltered slightly. "I really am sorry. We're short-staffed today and the kitchen is backed up." She gestured toward the busy restaurant. "But I promise to make sure your order gets priority." Something about the genuine apology in the young woman's eyes should have softened Jessica's mood, but the stress of her day had built up like pressure in a valve. "Fine, just an iced tea, no sugar. And I'll have the chicken Caesar salad, dressing on the side." "Great choice," Amber said, jotting down the order. "I'll put this in right away and get your tea." Jessica didn't respond, already back to her phone, firing off emails and making notes for the upcoming meeting. The tea arrived quickly, but then another 10 minutes passed without her food. Each minute that ticked by wound Jessica's nerves tighter. She watched as tables seated after hers received their orders, their servers checking in regularly while Amber seemed to have disappeared. When Amber finally returned with her salad, Jessica didn't bother to hide her annoyance. "Is there a reason everyone else got served before me despite your promise of priority?" Amber set the plate down carefully. "I'm really sorry about the wait. The kitchen got slammed with a large party order right after yours went in. Is there anything else I can get you right now? Maybe some fresh ground pepper or parmesan?" "No," Jessica said flatly. "This will do." The salad was actually quite good. Fresh, crisp romaine, perfectly grilled chicken still warm on top, and house-made croutons that crunched satisfyingly between her teeth. But Jessica hardly noticed, eating mechanically while reviewing her presentation slides on her phone. Her work bubble was interrupted when her phone rang. Her boss, Taylor, calling probably to add yet another revision to the report. Jessica answered immediately. "Jessica, where are we on those projection numbers?" Taylor's voice was sharp. "I'm just finishing up. Had to grab a quick lunch, but I'll be back in 20 minutes. Make it 10. The client moved up the call to 2:30. Jessica closed her eyes, feeling a headache building behind her temples. "I'll be there." She looked around for Amber, needing her check immediately, but her server was nowhere in sight. 5 more precious minutes ticked by before Amber appeared again, delivering food to a nearby table. Jessica raised her hand, trying to catch her attention. When Amber finally approached, Jessica didn't even let her speak. "I needed my check 10 minutes ago. I have to get back to the office." "Of course. I'll grab that right away," Amber replied, whisking away Jessica's half-eaten salad. The check came promptly, and Jessica quickly calculated the total, $18.75 for a salad and iced tea. Ridiculous prices for such poor service. She placed her credit card on the small tray without adding a tip. When Amber returned with the receipt, her eyes flicked briefly to the empty tip line. For a split second, something like hurt flashed across her face, but she quickly covered it with a professional smile. "Thank you for coming in today. I hope you'll visit us again." Jessica signed the receipt, gathered her things, and stood. "The service needs improvement if you want return customers," she said coolly. Amber's smile wavered. "I understand. We really were short-staffed today. One of our cooks called out sick and—" "That's not the customer's problem," Jessica cut her off, sliding the receipt across the table. "Management should plan better." A flush crept up Amber's neck as she nodded silently. Jessica turned away, not seeing how the young woman's hands trembled slightly as she collected the signed receipt, nor how she took a deep breath before continuing to her next table with a forced smile. Outside, Jessica hailed a taxi, her mind already shifting back to her presentation. By the time she reached her office building, the lunch interaction was forgotten. Just another forgettable transaction in a busy day. The afternoon passed in a blur of spreadsheets, client calls, and last-minute changes to her presentation. Jessica powered through, fueled by coffee and the leftover adrenaline from the morning's stress. When she finally delivered the presentation, the client seemed impressed, nodding along as she outlined the marketing strategy for their new product line. "Excellent work, Jessica," her boss said afterward, actually smiling for once. "You saved the day, again." A warm glow of satisfaction pushed away some of her earlier tension. This was why she worked so hard, for moments like this when her efforts were recognized and appreciated. Unlike that waitress who expected a reward for doing the bare minimum of her job, and poorly at that. As Jessica packed up her laptop, her phone buzzed with a text from her boyfriend, Ben. "Hey, beautiful. My parents want to meet you. Dinner tonight at their place. My sister will be there too. She just moved back to town." Jessica paused, her finger hovering over the screen. She'd been dating Ben for 6 months, but they'd both been so busy with work that meeting the family had been put on hold. Tonight wasn't ideal. She was exhausted and had planned to order takeout and collapse on her couch with a glass of wine and the latest episode of her favorite crime drama. But she knew this was important to Ben. She typed back, "What time? And should I bring anything?" His response came quickly. 7:30, just yourself. Mom's making her famous lasagna. Address is 287 Oak Ridge Lane. Can't wait for you to meet everyone." Jessica glanced at the time, 5:45 p.m. Just enough time to go home, shower, change, and maybe pick up a bottle of wine anyway, because showing up empty-handed wasn't her style. As she rode the elevator down to the lobby, Jessica felt a flutter of nerves. First impressions mattered, and she wanted Ben's family to like her. She'd been so focused on her career these past few years that serious relationships had taken a back seat, but with Ben things felt different. He understood her drive and ambition because he shared it, working long hours at his law firm while still making time for them. Outside, the earlier drizzle had stopped, leaving the streets glistening in the early evening light. Jessica felt a second wind coming on. Maybe this dinner was exactly what she needed to reset after such a stressful day. A chance to be just Jessica the girlfriend, not Jessica the marketing executive. Little did she know that her lunchtime interaction wasn't as forgotten as she thought. In fact, it was about to come full circle in the most unexpected way. Jessica's apartment was her sanctuary, a small but stylish one-bedroom with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a partial view of the city skyline. She kicked off her heels the moment she stepped inside, sighing as her feet met the cool hardwood floor. "Home, sweet home," she murmured, dropping her keys in the ceramic bowl by the door. She had exactly 1 hour to transform from frazzled executive to charming girlfriend meeting the parents. Jessica headed straight for the shower, letting hot water wash away the day's tension. As steam filled the bathroom, she found herself thinking about Ben's family. What would they be like? He'd mentioned his father was a retired doctor, and his mother taught high school English. His sister, what was her name again? Anna, Alyssa? Ben had mentioned it once or twice, but Jessica had been distracted with work calls both times. After her shower, Jessica stood before her closet, towel wrapped around her. What exactly did one wear to meet potential future in-laws? Too formal would seem stiff, too casual disrespectful. She finally settled on dark jeans, a soft blue sweater that brought out her eyes, and simple gold earrings. Put together but not trying too hard. As she applied light makeup, Jessica rehearsed potential conversation topics. Ben's parents would probably ask about her job, her family, how she and Ben met at that charity fundraiser last spring. Standard getting-to-know-you questions. She could handle those with ease. It was the deeper stuff she worried about, whether they'd sense she wasn't exactly the warm, nurturing type who dreamed of white picket fences and 2.5 kids. A glance at her watch sent her hurrying. It was already 6:45, and with traffic, she'd barely make it on time. Jessica grabbed her phone, keys, and a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon she'd been saving for a special occasion. This certainly qualified. The drive to the suburbs took longer than expected. Jessica tapped her fingers nervously on the steering wheel as she navigated unfamiliar streets, lined with mature trees and well-kept homes. It was a different world from her downtown apartment, quieter, slower, with actual front yards and children's bicycles left on driveways. She found 287 Oak Ridge Lane at exactly 7:32 p.m. The house was a handsome two-story colonial with warm light spilling from the windows. A wreath hung on the front door despite it being months away from any major holiday. The kind of house that looked lived in and loved, Jessica thought as she checked her reflection one last time in the rearview mirror. Taking a deep breath, she walked up the stone path to the front door and rang the bell. From inside, she heard footsteps approaching. The door swung open to reveal a tall man with Ben's smile and salt and pepper hair. "You must be Jessica." Come in, come in. I'm Robert, Ben's dad. It's wonderful to meet you." "Dr. Morgan," Jessica said, stepping into a warm foyer that smelled of garlic and tomato sauce. "Please, it's just Robert," he insisted, taking her coat. "No one calls me doctor anymore except telemarketers trying to sell me insurance." His laugh was friendly and genuine. "I brought this," Jessica said, offering the wine bottle. "I hope Cabernet is okay." "Perfect. We're having lasagna. Ben," he called toward the back of the house. "Jessica's here." Ben appeared from what Jessica assumed was the kitchen, his face breaking into a wide smile at the sight of her. He looked different here, more relaxed in jeans and a casual button-down, his usual suit nowhere in sight. "Hey," he said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. "You found us okay?" "Your directions were perfect," she replied, feeling some of her nervousness fade at his familiar presence. He took her hand, leading her further into the house. "Mom's just finishing up dinner. Come meet her." The kitchen was spacious and inviting, with copper pots hanging from a rack and family photos covering the refrigerator. A woman with Ben's eyes stood at the island tossing a salad in a wooden bowl. "Mom, this is Jessica," Ben said. The woman looked up and smiled warmly. "Jessica, we've heard so much about you. I'm Linda." She wiped her hands on her apron and came around the island to give Jessica an unexpected hug. "Welcome to our home." Jessica, not typically a hugger, found herself returning the embrace. "Thank you for having me. Your home is lovely." "Oh, it's nothing fancy, but it's ours," Linda said. "We've been here 30 years now. Raised both kids in this house." She turned to the oven. "Dinner's almost ready. Ben, why don't you show Jessica around while I finish up?" "Your sister just called. She's running a bit late." "Big surprise there." Linda rolled her eyes good-naturedly. Ben gave Jessica a quick tour. The living room with its worn but comfortable furniture, the dining room where the table was already set with what looked like good china, the backyard with its garden beds now dormant for the coming winter. "Your parents are great," Jessica said when they had a moment alone in the living room, looking at Ben's childhood photos on the wall. "I was nervous for nothing," Ben smiled, squeezing her hand. "They already like you, I can tell. Dad doesn't break out the good wine glasses for just anyone." "I'm still a little nervous about meeting your sister," Jessica admitted. "You two are close, right?" "Yeah, but don't worry. Amber's easy to get along with. She's just moved back after finishing culinary school. She's been staying here while looking for her own place." Jessica nodded, admiring a photo of teenage Ben with his arm around a young girl with curly hair. Something tugged at her memory, but before she could place it, Robert called them for dinner. In the dining room, Linda was placing a steaming dish of lasagna on the table. "Ben, would you open Jessica's wine? Amber just texted she's pulling into the driveway." As Ben went to get a corkscrew, the front door opened and closed. "Sorry I'm late," called a female voice from the hallway. "We haven't started yet," Linda called back. "Come meet Ben's girlfriend." Jessica stood by her chair, smoothing her sweater and preparing her most winning smile. She heard footsteps approaching and turned toward the dining room entrance. Time seemed to freeze as a young woman with curly hair pulled into a loose ponytail stepped into the room. The same curly hair Jessica had seen just hours earlier, attached to the waitress she'd stiffed at lunch. Amber's eyes widened in recognition, her smile faltering for just a fraction of a second before recovering. If Jessica hadn't been staring directly at her, she might have missed it. "Hi," Amber said, her voice carefully neutral. "I'm Amber, nice to meet you." Jessica felt the blood drain from her face. This couldn't be happening. Of all the restaurants in the city, of all the waitresses who could have served her lunch, what were the odds? "Jessica," she managed to reply, her voice sounding strange to her own ears. "Nice to meet you too." If Ben's parents noticed the sudden tension in the air, they didn't show it. Robert ushered everyone to sit while Linda brought in a basket of garlic bread. "Amber, Jessica brought this lovely Cabernet. Isn't that thoughtful?" Linda said, oblivious to the silent communication happening between the two younger women. "Very thoughtful," Amber agreed, taking her seat directly across from Jessica. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Jessica caught a flash of something: hurt, anger, amusement, before Amber looked away. Ben returned with the opened wine and began pouring for everyone. "Jess works in marketing," he told his family proudly. "She just landed the Henderson account today, right, babe?" Jessica nodded mechanically, accepting a glass of wine from Ben. She took a larger sip than she'd intended, needing something to steady her nerves. "Marketing sounds fascinating," Robert said. "What exactly do you do day to day?" As Jessica launched into her standard explanation of her role, she felt Amber's eyes on her. The irony wasn't lost on Jessica. Just hours ago, she'd been the one in control, the customer with the power to make or break someone's day with a tip. Now the tables had turned. She was the outsider here, trying to make a good impression on Ben's family while knowing one of them had seen her at her worst. The lasagna was passed around, and despite her churning stomach, Jessica had to admit it looked and smelled incredible. Linda beamed as everyone took their first bites. "Mom, this is amazing as always," Ben said. "It really is delicious," Jessica agreed, genuinely impressed despite her discomfort. "Amber helped with the sauce," Linda said proudly. "She's the real chef in the family now." All eyes turned to Amber, who shrugged modestly. "Just a few tweaks to Mom's recipe. Nothing major." "Don't be so humble," Robert said. "Your culinary degree wasn't just for show." "Jessica, Amber just graduated top of her class from the Institute of Culinary Arts. She's working at Café Bleu while applying for sous chef positions." Jessica nearly choked on her wine. Café Bleu, of course. She hadn't just encountered Amber by chance. The young woman was actually pursuing her career there. Jessica took another large sip of wine, wishing the floor would open up and swallow her whole. The conversation flowed around her as she struggled to appear normal, nodding and smiling at appropriate moments while her mind raced. "So, Jessica," Linda said, passing the salad bowl, "Ben tells us you grew up in Portland. Do your parents still live there?" Jessica pulled herself back to the moment. "Yes, they do. My dad owns a small bookstore downtown, and my mom teaches piano lessons from home." "How lovely," Linda replied. "We're big readers in this family. Right, Amber?" Amber nodded, her expression unreadable. "Mom's the real bookworm. She practically forced literature on us as kids." "Forced is a strong word," Linda protested with a laugh. "Strongly encouraged, maybe. Remember when you bribed me with $1 for every classic I finished over summer break?" Ben chimed in, grinning at Jessica. "I made $23 one year." "Best investment I ever made," Linda said proudly. "Now he reads contracts all day and gets paid much more than $1. The family's easy banter highlighted Jessica's outsider status. They had shared histories, inside jokes, and a comfortable rhythm she couldn't match. Add in the awkward lunch incident with Amber, and Jessica felt completely out of place. "Jessica closed a huge deal today," Ben said, squeezing her hand under the table. "Tell them about it, babe." All eyes turned to her expectantly. Even Amber seemed genuinely interested, temporarily setting aside whatever feelings she might have about their earlier encounter. "It wasn't just me," Jessica said modestly. "Our whole team's been working on the Henderson account for months. But yes, we finalized the deal today. It's our biggest client yet." "That's wonderful," Robert said. "What exactly will you be doing for them?" As Jessica explained the marketing campaign they'd developed, she found herself relaxing slightly. Work was her comfort zone. Here, at least, she knew what she was talking about. Even Amber asked a thoughtful question about the target demographics. When Jessica finished, Robert raised his glass. To Jessica's success. Sounds like they're lucky to have you. Everyone clinked glasses, and Jessica felt a flush of pleasure at the simple acknowledgement. Her own parents, while loving, had never quite understood her drive or ambition. They were happiest in their quiet, stable lives, while Jessica had always hungered for more challenges, more success, more recognition. Enough about work, Ben said, refilling wine glasses. Mom, didn't you want to show Jessica those embarrassing baby photos of me? Don't you dare, Ben groaned, but his eyes were twinkling. As they cleared the dinner plates and Linda brought out a homemade apple pie, the conversation shifted to family stories. Jessica learned about Ben's childhood shenanigans, his father's days as a resident doctor falling asleep in supply closets, and Linda's adventures teaching high school English for 30 years. Throughout it all, Jessica kept finding her gaze, drawn to Amber, who participated in the storytelling but seemed to be holding something back. There was a carefulness to her interactions with Jessica that wasn't there when she spoke to her parents or brother. Amber, why don't you tell Jessica about your new apartment hunt? Linda suggested as she served the pie. Amber hesitated briefly. Not much to tell yet. I've seen a few places, but nothing feels right. Either they're way overpriced or have serious issues. Didn't you look at one with a bathroom door that wouldn't close? Ben asked. That was actually one of the better ones, Amber replied with a wry smile. At least it had a door. Another place had just a shower curtain separating the bathroom from the bedroom. That's ridiculous, Jessica said, genuinely appalled. Rental prices in the city are out of control. Amber looked at her directly for the first time since sitting down. They really are. It makes working multiple jobs almost mandatory even for people with degrees. There it was, the first subtle reference to their earlier encounter. Jessica felt her face grow warm. Have you considered looking in the Westbridge area? She asked, keeping her voice casual. My friend just found a decent one-bedroom there for under market value. I'll check it out, Amber said after a moment, her expression softening slightly. Thanks for the tip. The word tip hung in the air between them. Jessica took a bite of pie to hide her discomfort. This pie is incredible, she said to Linda, meaning it. The perfect balance of sweet and tart, with a buttery crust that melted in her mouth. Family recipe, Linda said proudly. Amber's the only one who's mastered it besides me. Neither Ben nor his father have the patience for proper pastry. It's true, Robert admitted. I once tried to make Linda's birthday cake. The fire department still sends us Christmas cards. Everyone laughed, and for a moment, Jessica felt included in their warmth. Then Ben's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it with a frown. Everything okay? Jessica asked. Client emergency, he said, looking apologetic. I need to make a quick call. Sorry about this. He stood, touching his mother's shoulder. Back in 10 minutes, tops. As Ben left the room, an awkward silence descended. Robert, oblivious to the tension, launched into a story about his golf game that morning, but Jessica found it hard to focus. Amber was watching her with an unreadable expression. I'll start clearing these, Linda said when Robert finished his story, gathering empty dessert plates. Robert, help me with the coffee? Of course, dear. He followed his wife to the kitchen, leaving Jessica and Amber alone at the table. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. Jessica took a deep breath. She hadn't gotten where she was in life by avoiding difficult situations. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. Amber raised an eyebrow, her expression cautious. For what exactly? For my behavior at lunch today, Jessica said. I was rude and impatient, and I shouldn't have taken my stress out on you. Amber studied her for a moment. And the tip, or lack thereof? Jessica winced. That too, especially that. Do you know what servers make as an hourly wage? Amber asked, her voice even. Not angry, just matter of fact. Not enough, Jessica admitted. I know better, I really do. I've waited tables myself back in college. Surprise flickered across Amber's face. Then you definitely should know better. I do, Jessica said. I was having a terrible day, but that's no excuse. What I did was wrong. Amber's posture relaxed slightly. Thank you for saying that, not many people would. I'm not trying to make excuses, but you were having a terrible day. Amber finished for her. I get it. We all have those. Jessica nodded, grateful for the small opening. Your brother means a lot to me. I'd hate for this to create problems between us. A small smile tugged at the corner of Amber's mouth. Ben really likes you, you know. He talks about you all the time. He talks about you too, Jessica said. He's proud of you. The culinary school, your ambitions. He's always been my biggest cheerleader, Amber said, her expression softening. Even when my parents worried about the stability of a culinary career, Ben never doubted me for a second. From the kitchen, they heard Ben's voice as he returned from his call. Amber leaned forward slightly. Look, what happened at lunch? Let's just move past it, she said quickly. Everyone has bad days and makes mistakes. I'm willing to start fresh if you are. Relief washed over Jessica. I'd like that. Thank you. But, Amber added, a mischievous glint in her eye, I might bring it up occasionally when I need a favor from Ben's girlfriend. Jessica let out a surprised laugh. That seems fair. When Ben returned to the dining room, he found the two women, chatting about their favorite restaurants in the city. The earlier tension noticeably dissipated. Everything okay? He asked, glancing between them. Just getting to know your girlfriend, Amber said with a small smile. She has surprisingly good taste in food for someone who works in an office all day. Hey, I appreciate good food, Jessica protested lightly. I just don't always have time to find it. That's what you have me for now, Amber replied. I know all the best spots that won't break your budget. Ben looked pleased but slightly confused by their sudden camaraderie. Did I miss something? Nothing. Important, Amber said, exchanging a look with Jessica. Just girl talk. When Robert and Linda returned with coffee, the conversation turned to family vacations, with Ben and Amber debating which childhood trip had been the best. The Grand Canyon, Ben insisted. Nothing beats that sunrise. You slept through the sunrise, Amber countered. The Cape Cod trip was better. Remember those lobster rolls? As they playfully argued, Jessica watched the siblings with growing warmth. She'd been an only child, and this kind of loving banter was foreign but appealing. Despite the rocky start, she was beginning to feel something she hadn't expected, a genuine connection not just with Ben but with his family. Later, as they prepared to leave, Linda pressed a container of leftover pie into Jessica's hands. For tomorrow, she said with a wink. A little sweetness to start your day. Thank you for everything, Jessica said, meaning it more than Linda could know. Dinner was wonderful. You're welcome back any time, Robert said, giving her a brief fatherly hug. When it was Amber's turn to say goodbye, she hesitated before stepping forward to embrace Jessica. See you around, she said. Maybe for lunch sometime? The gentle teasing made Jessica smile. I'd like that. My treat, of course. As she and Ben walked to her car, hand in hand under a sky scattered with stars, Jessica felt lighter somehow. The day that had started so terribly had ended with unexpected connection and even a kind of redemption. So, Ben said, pulling her close, what did you think of my family? Jessica smiled up at him. They're wonderful, especially your sister. I knew you two would hit it off, he said, clearly pleased. Amber can be a bit reserved at first, but once she warms up to people, she's the best. I think we're going to be good friends, Jessica said, thinking of the unlikely bridge they'd built over dinner. She's someone worth knowing better. 2 weeks after the dinner at Ben's parents' house, Jessica found herself sitting in a small coffee shop downtown, nervously checking her watch. She was meeting Amber for coffee, an idea that had seemed good when they'd exchanged numbers but now filled her with a strange mix of anticipation and dread. The bell above the door jingled, and Amber walked in, unwrapping a blue scarf from around her neck. She spotted Jessica and waved, making her way through the crowded tables. Sorry I'm late, she said, sliding into the chair across from Jessica. The bus was running behind. No problem, Jessica replied, pushing a cup toward her. I ordered for you. Almond milk latte, right? Ben mentioned it was your go-to. Surprise flickered across Amber's face as she accepted the cup. Thanks. That's thoughtful of you. An awkward silence fell between them. They'd managed to end the dinner at Ben's parents' house on good terms, but this was different. Just the two of them, no family buffer to ease the way. So, they both said simultaneously, then laughed. You first, Amber offered. Jessica took a deep breath. I wanted to thank you again for not telling Ben about what happened at the restaurant. That could have been really awkward. Amber shrugged, blowing gently on her latte. What would be the point besides everyone has bad days? Still, I appreciate it. Jessica hesitated, then reached into her bag. I actually brought something for you. She pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. Amber raised an eyebrow but opened it. Inside was cash, significantly more than a standard tip would have been for Jessica's lunch that day. I can't accept this, Amber said immediately, trying to hand it back. Please, Jessica insisted. It's not just about the tip. It's about acknowledging that I was wrong. Consider it karma correction. Amber looked at the envelope for a long moment, then slowly tucked it into her pocket. Thank you. This will actually help with first month's rent if I find a place. Any luck with the apartment hunt? Actually, yes. Amber's face brightened. I checked out that Westbridge area you mentioned. Found a small studio that's within my budget. I'm signing the lease tomorrow. That's great, Jessica said, genuinely pleased. The neighborhood has some wonderful little shops, too. I noticed. There's a used bookstore on the corner that I already know I'll spend too much time in. Amber smiled, then took a sip of her latte. So, how are things with you and my brother? The question was casual, but Jessica sensed its importance. She was, after all, dating Amber's only sibling. Good, really good, actually, Jessica admitted. He's different from other guys I've dated, more thoughtful. He's always been that way, Amber said fondly. Even as a kid, he was the one remembering everyone's birthdays, making Mother's Day cards weeks in advance. That doesn't surprise me at all, Jessica said, thinking of how Ben had remembered she'd mentioned loving peonies once months ago, and brought her some just last week for no special occasion. Can I ask you something? Amber said suddenly. Jessica nodded, though a flicker of nervousness returned. Of course. What happened that day at the restaurant? You don't seem like the type to normally treat servers badly. Jessica winced, looking down at her coffee. I'm not. At least I don't want to be. She sighed, meeting Amber's eyes. I was having the day from hell. My boss moved up a major presentation with no warning. A client was threatening to pull their account, and I'd been working since 5 a.m. trying to fix everything. Amber listened attentively as Jessica continued. None of that excuses how I behaved, Jessica added quickly, but I was stressed and taking it out on everyone around me. You just happened to be in the line of fire. I get it, Amber said after a moment. The restaurant industry has its own version of days like that. Kitchens can be pressure cookers. Is that why you love cooking? Jessica asked, curious about this woman who was becoming increasingly important in her life, both as Ben's sister and potentially as a friend in her own right. Amber's face lit up. Partly. I love the intensity, the precision mixed with creativity. But mostly I love how food brings people together. She grinned. Sounds cheesy, but it's true. Not cheesy at all, Jessica said, thinking of the warmth around the Morgan family dinner table. I can see that. What about marketing? Amber asked. What drew you to that? Jessica considered the question. No one had asked her that in years, not even Ben. I like the psychology of it, understanding what makes people tick, what motivates them. And I'm good at it, she added with a small smile. I like being good at things. I can relate to that, Amber said. Nothing feels better than nailing a difficult recipe or creating something new that people love. As they continued talking, Jessica was surprised by how easily the conversation flowed. They discussed their childhoods, Amber growing up in the suburbs with supportive parents, Jessica in Portland with parents who never quite understood her ambitions. They talked about books they'd loved, places they wanted to travel, and eventually, inevitably, about Ben. He talks about you all the time, Amber said, ordering them both a second coffee. It's actually kind of annoying. Jessica laughed. What does he say? Oh, you know. Jessica is so brilliant at work. Jessica has the best taste in music. Jessica can solve the Sunday crossword in pen. Amber rolled her eyes good-naturedly. I've never seen him like this about anyone before. Jessica felt a warm glow spread through her chest. He's pretty special himself. He is, Amber agreed, her expression turning serious. And he's been through a lot. Did he tell you about Tanya? Jessica shook her head. Who's Tanya? Amber looked uncomfortable. Maybe I shouldn't have brought it up. It's his story to tell. Now you have to tell me, Jessica insisted, curious about this unknown part of Ben's past. Amber sighed. His college girlfriend. They were together for 3 years and everyone thought they'd get married. But she took a job overseas without even discussing it with him. Just announced she was moving to London in 2 weeks. And that was that. That's awful, Jessica said, thinking of Ben's occasional reluctance to talk about future plans. It messed him up for a while, Amber confirmed, made him cautious about serious relationships. She gave Jessica a meaningful look. Until you. Jessica didn't know how to respond to that. She and Ben had never explicitly discussed where their relationship was heading, though lately she'd been thinking about it more often. I'm not trying to pressure you or anything, Amber added quickly. I just want you to understand why he might sometimes seem hesitant about certain things. I appreciate you telling me, Jessica said sincerely. It helps explain some things. Their conversation shifted to lighter topics, but Jessica filed away this new information about Ben. It made her see him in a slightly different light, not just as the confident lawyer he presented to the world, but as someone who had his own vulnerabilities and past wounds. So, Amber said as they were finishing their coffees, Ben mentioned you might come to dinner at his place this weekend. He's cooking. She made a face that clearly communicated her doubts about her brother's culinary skills. Jessica laughed. Is it that bad? Let's just say his specialty is speed dialing the nearest takeout, Amber replied. But he's been practicing, apparently. Asked me for some basic recipes. That's sweet, Jessica said, touched by the thought of Ben trying to cook for her. It is, Amber agreed. But maybe I should stop by earlier and make sure he's not about to poison you both. She hesitated. Unless you'd rather just have time alone with him. Actually, Jessica said, surprising herself, I'd love it if you helped. Maybe you could show us both some basics? I'm not much of a cook either, to be honest. Seriously? Amber's eyes lit up. I'd love to. Nothing fancy, just some simple techniques that'll make you both look like you know what you're doing. Perfect, Jessica said. Ben always talks about your cooking skills. It would be fun to learn from you. As they gathered their things to leave, Jessica realized with some surprise that she genuinely enjoyed spending time with Amber. What had started as an obligation, peace offering to her boyfriend's sister, had evolved into something that felt like the beginning of a real friendship outside the coffee shop. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows on the sidewalk. Amber wrapped her blue scarf back around her neck, protection against the crisp autumn breeze. This was nice, she said, sounding slightly surprised herself. We should do it again sometime. Definitely, Jessica agreed. Maybe after you move into your new place. I could help with unpacking or something? I'd like that, Amber said with a smile. Most of my friends moved away after culinary school, so I could use some help and the company. They said goodbye with a slightly awkward but genuine hug. And as Jessica walked toward her car, she felt oddly lighter. The universe had a strange sense of humor, bringing Amber back into her life this way. What had started as one of the most mortifying experiences of her adult life was transforming into something unexpected and valuable. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ben. How was coffee with my sister? Should I be worried? Jessica smiled and typed back, it was great. No worries needed, though she did mention someone named Tanya. 3 dots appeared immediately as Ben started typing, then disappeared, then appeared again. Jessica could almost picture his face trying to figure out how to respond. Finally, his message came through. That's a conversation for in person. Dinner tomorrow night? Just the 2 of us. Perfect, Jessica replied. And Ben? I'm really glad I met your family. It was true, she realized. Despite the rocky start with Amber, meeting Ben's family had brought a dimension to her life that had been missing, a sense of connection and belonging that went beyond her career achievements and professional identity. For someone who had always defined herself by her work, it was both unsettling and exhilarating to find herself caring so deeply about these new relationships. Another text from Ben appeared. "They're glad they met you too. Especially Amber, she just texted me that you're actually pretty cool. High praise from my little sister." Jessica laughed out loud, drawing curious glances from passers-by. If only Ben knew the whole story. Maybe someday she and Amber would tell him, when it had become just another funny anecdote in their shared history, rather than an embarrassing first encounter. For now, though, it was their secret, the strange twist of fate that had turned a terrible lunch service into the beginning of an unexpected friendship. 6 months later, Jessica stood in her kitchen, frowning at the pot of sauce bubbling on the stove. Despite Amber's patient teaching over the past few months, cooking still didn't come naturally to her. She gave the tomato sauce another stir and checked her phone for the 10th time in as many minutes. "It's supposed to be thick, right?" she muttered to herself, comparing the runny mixture to the photo Amber had sent. The doorbell rang, making Jessica jump. She quickly wiped her hands on a dish towel and hurried to answer it, relief washing over her when she saw Amber standing there, reusable grocery bags in both hands. "Please tell me you brought reinforcements," Jessica said by way of greeting. Ushering her inside, Amber laughed, breathing in the apartment's aroma. Not bad. Garlic's a bit burned, but salvageable." She set the bags on the counter and peered into the pot. "Yeah, you need to let it reduce more. Turn up the heat slightly and keep stirring." Jessica did as instructed while Amber unpacked fresh bread, a bottle of wine, and a small cake box. "You're a lifesaver," Jessica said gratefully. "I wanted tonight to be perfect, and I was about 5 minutes from calling for takeout." "Cooking for the parents is a big deal," Amber agreed, expertly chopping fresh basil to add to the sauce. "But you've got this. Mom and Dad already love you, and they're not exactly food critics." Jessica wished she shared Amber's confidence. In the months since meeting Ben's family, she'd been gradually welcomed into their fold. Sunday dinners, holiday celebrations, even a weekend at their lake cabin. But hosting Robert and Linda at her apartment for the first time felt significant, a reversal of roles she wanted to get right. "Ben texted that he's running late from court," Jessica said, reaching for plates to set the table. "But he should be here before your parents arrive." "Typical lawyer," Amber said with an affectionate eye roll. "Always the last to show up." She tasted the sauce, added a pinch of salt, and nodded approvingly. "Much better, see? You're learning," Jessica smiled, thinking of how much had changed since that disastrous lunch at Café Bleu. What had begun as an embarrassing coincidence had evolved into one of the most important friendships in her life. Amber had become not just Ben's sister but a confidant, weekend brunch companion, and patient cooking instructor. "How's the new job going?" Jessica asked as they worked side by side preparing the meal. Amber's face lit up. "I love it. The head chef is demanding but brilliant. I'm learning so much." After months of applications and trials, she had finally landed an assistant chef position at a well-regarded restaurant downtown. "The hours are brutal, though. I barely see my apartment." "That's why you're always here raiding my fridge," Jessica teased. "Hey, I bring food too," Amber protested, gesturing to the cake box. "That's not from a store, by the way. Made it myself this morning." Jessica peeked inside at the perfect chocolate cake. "Show off." Their easy banter was interrupted by the sound of keys in the lock. Ben walked in looking tired but happy in his slightly rumpled suit. "Something smells amazing," he said, setting down his briefcase and coming into the kitchen to kiss Jessica. "Hey sis," he added, giving Amber a quick hug. "Should have known you'd be here helping." "Just providing moral support," Amber said, winking at Jessica. "Your girlfriend did all the work." Ben looked impressed. "Really? Last time you tried to cook pasta, the smoke alarm went off." "That was ages ago," Jessica protested. "I've improved." "She has," Amber confirmed. "All those cooking lessons are paying off." Ben smiled, loosening his tie. "I'm going to change quickly before my parents get here." He paused in the hallway. "Oh, I almost forgot. I have news about Café Bleu." Both women turned to look at him with interest. "They're closing," Ben said. "The owners are retiring and selling the building. There was a notice on the door when I walked past today." Amber and Jessica exchanged a look, both thinking of the place where their unlikely connection had begun. That's too bad, Amber said. It was a good first job out of culinary school. Yeah, Jessica agreed softly. It holds some memorable moments. Ben looked between them, puzzled by the significant glance they'd shared. Am I missing something? Inside joke, Amber said quickly. I should check on the pasta. She turned back to the stove, hiding her smile. In the 6 months of their friendship, Jessica and Amber had never told Ben about their first meeting. It had become something private between them, a shared secret that somehow made their bond stronger. I'm going to change, Ben said, still looking slightly confused. My parents texted they're 5 minutes away. When he left the room, Amber turned to Jessica. We should tell him someday, you know. It's actually a pretty funny story now. Maybe at your wedding, Jessica suggested with a grin. It would make a great toast. My wedding? More likely yours, Amber countered, raising an eyebrow meaningfully. Jessica felt her face grow warm. She and Ben had been talking more seriously about their future lately, but she hadn't realized it was so obvious to others. Don't look so panicked, Amber laughed. It's a good thing. You make him happy. Before Jessica could respond, the doorbell rang again, announcing Robert and Linda's arrival. The next few minutes were a flurry of hugs, compliments on the apartment, and Linda insisting on helping bring the food to the table despite Jessica's protests as they settled around Jessica's dining table, a recent purchase that replaced the small IKEA desk where she used to eat standing up. Between work emails, she felt a wave of contentment. Robert was telling a story about a patient from his doctor days. Linda was admiring the fresh flowers Jessica had bought for the occasion, and Ben was pouring wine with the relaxed smile she'd grown to love. Across from her, Amber caught her eye and gave a small nod of approval at how well everything had come together. It was hard to believe this was the same woman Jessica had dismissed so carelessly that day at the restaurant. Jessica, this sauce is wonderful, Linda said, taking another bite of pasta. You must give me the recipe. It's actually Amber's recipe, Jessica admitted. She's been teaching me. The student has surpassed the master, Amber said with a theatrical bow. Next, we're tackling soufflés. God help us all, Ben muttered, earning a playful swat from Jessica. To the chef, Robert proposed, raising his glass in Jessica's direction. And to family dinners. To family, everyone echoed, clinking glasses. The word hung in the air, wrapping around Jessica like a warm blanket. Family. Not so long ago, her life had been all about work, deadlines and clients, and climbing the corporate ladder. Her apartment had been just a place to sleep between meetings. Meals had been whatever she could grab on the go. Now her home was filled with laughter and conversation. Her refrigerator held leftovers from meals shared with people she cared about. Her weekends included farmers' market trips with Amber and lazy Sundays with Ben, not just catching up on emails and preparing for Monday meetings. You're quiet, Ben whispered, squeezing her hand under the table. Everything okay? Jessica nodded, watching as Amber enthusiastically explained a cooking technique to Linda. Everything's perfect, actually. And it was. Her career was still important. She'd recently been promoted to senior marketing director, but it no longer defined her entire existence. She had found balance and, more importantly, connection. After dinner, as they all moved to the living room with coffee and Amber's chocolate cake, Robert pulled out a small photo album from his bag. Linda thought you might enjoy seeing these, he said, passing it to Jessica. Some old family photos, including a few embarrassing ones of Ben and Amber as kids. Dad, no, Ben groaned, while Amber laughed and scooted closer to Jessica on the couch. Oh, you have to see the one of Ben in his band phase, she said gleefully, complete with eyeliner and a terrible attempt at spiky hair. As they flipped through the pages, Jessica found herself drawn to the stories behind each image. Camping trips where it rained the entire time, but they stayed anyway. School plays with homemade costumes. Holidays around the same dining table where she'd first met them all. Halfway through the album, she paused at a photo of a much younger Amber in a chef's hat, proudly holding a lopsided birthday cake. My first attempt at baking, Amber explained. I was 10. It was supposed to be a surprise for Mom's birthday, but I forgot the baking powder. It was like a chocolate brick. But I ate every bite, Linda said fondly, because it was made with love. Jessica looked up from the album to find Ben watching her with a soft expression she couldn't quite read. He held her gaze for a long moment, then smiled and turned back to the conversation. Later, as they were saying goodbye at the door, Linda pulled Jessica into a warm hug. "Thank you for a lovely evening, dear," she said. "It means so much to see the kids so happy." "Kids?" Jessica repeated with amusement. Linda laughed. "Ben and Amber, of course. But also you." She patted Jessica's cheek gently. "You're part of this family now, whether you know it or not." After they left, Jessica and Ben began clearing up while Amber packed leftover cake into containers. "That went well," Ben said, loading the dishwasher. "My mom couldn't stop raving about how lovely your apartment is." "I think she was just being nice," Jessica said. "But it did go well, didn't it?" Amber snorted. "My mom doesn't do just being nice. If she says she likes something, she means it." "True," Ben agreed. "She once told my boss his tie was unfortunate at a firm dinner. Completely straight-faced. They worked together companionably, cleaning up the kitchen and restoring order to the apartment. It struck Jessica how natural it felt, this domestic scene with Ben and his sister. How easily they had all fit into each other's lives. When everything was done, Amber collected her things to leave. "Thanks for a great night," she said, hugging Jessica. "Same time next Sunday for brunch?"